My wife called me a loser she divorced from my business. So I showed her and her family what a loser can do. 7 years. 7 years I'd poured into this marriage, into this life, into Sarah. And tonight, our 7th anniversary, was supposed to be a quiet celebration, a testament to that endurance, hosted in the home I'd literally rebuilt with my own hands. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I forged mine from steel, sweat, and the kind of sleepless nights that blur into weeks when you're trying to build an architectural design firm from the ground up. I'd always hoped, somewhere deep down, that my success, the tangible proof of my dedication, would eventually bridge the invisible chasm between me and Sarah's family. They were old money, East Coast establishment, and I was James, the guy from a working-class neighborhood who dared to dream bigger than his zip code. Sarah, when I first met her, she had this fire and idealism that was incandescent. She was brilliant, driven, heading to law school with dreams of changing the world. That fire drew me in, warmed me. Now, a junior partner at a prestigious corporate law firm, a position I'd proudly and quite literally funded through her Ivy League years, that fire seemed different. It was still there, but banked cooler, with a calculating gleam that sometimes unervingly mirrored her father's. Her family. Richard, her father, a financial advisor who moved in circles I only read about, never missed an opportunity to remind me, with thinly veiled condescension, of my trade background. "Business good, James?" he'd ask, his tone implying he expected me to confess I was on the brink of ruin. "Still managing to keep the lights on with those projects of yours?" His logic was simple. Class was paramount, and Sarah, in his eyes, had married down. He was perpetually waiting for her to correct her mistake. Her mother, Eleanor, was his echo, a woman whose life revolved around maintaining appearances and the right social connections. And then there was Tom, Sarah's brother. Mid-30s, working a comfortable but unremarkable job at Richard's firm, he carried himself with an unearned arrogance, masking what I suspected was a deep-seated insecurity and perhaps a twinge of jealousy towards my self-made success. His favorite conversational gambit was, "Well, in our world, James," usually a preface to some dismissive comment. Tonight, I was in the kitchen, the scent of rosemary and roasting lamb, Sarah's favorite, filling the air. I'd spent the afternoon meticulously preparing an elaborate meal, a ritual I performed for every family gathering, partly out of love for Sarah, partly as a silent offering to her family, a demonstration of my capability, my worthiness. This house, the one I'd bought as a dilapidated shell and painstakingly renovated, transforming its tired bones into a modern sanctuary, was meant to be our sanctuary, a symbol of what we could build together. Lately, though, it had felt more like a stage for their silent judgment. Sarah had been distant, glued to her phone, taking hushed calls in the other room, a new habit that pricked at the edges of my awareness. I dismissed it as work stress, the pressure of her new partnership. I chose to see stress. I admitted to myself now, plating the seared scallops, another of her favorites. I refused to see strategy. I remembered a comment she'd made a few weeks ago, something about our future financial security, delivered with an odd intensity. I brushed it off. How could I not? This was Sarah, the woman whose law school tuition I'd paid while my own business was a fledgling dream, subsisting on ramen and grit. Every extra shift I took back then, every personal project I deferred, I told myself it was an investment in us. I just hadn't realized she had her own, very different definition of return on investment. The scallops were perfect. The music, a curated playlist of soft jazz, drifted through the open-plan living area. I glanced at the dining table, set with the good china we rarely used. Everything was ready. Almost. We needed a couple more chairs from the garage. Richard and Eleanor had confirmed at the last minute they were bringing an elderly aunt. Just grabbing some chairs, I called out to Sarah, who was arranging flowers in the living room, her back to me. The side door to the garage was slightly ajar. As I approached, I heard voices Tom and Sarah. They were around the corner, by the azaleas I'd planted last spring, hidden from the patio, sharing a cigarette, another new habit of hers I hadn't questioned, assuming it was the pressure of her job. I was about to call out, to announce my presence when I heard my name. I froze. "I still can't believe you married this loser, Sarah," Tom said, his voice laced with its usual disdain, but sharper tonight. "Dad's right. Divorce him before you have kids and get stuck forever. He'll always just be a guy with a hammer, no matter how many fancy buildings he designs." A beat of silence, then Sarah's voice, cool and clear as ice, a voice I barely recognized. "Already working on it, Tom. My lawyer says we can take half his business too. It's grown enough now to be worth the trouble." A slight pause, then, "He'll never see it coming. Besides, a clean break now means I'm free for someone more suitable." The air punched from my lungs. It wasn't just the words, the casual venom, the years of pretense they implied. It was her voice, devoid of any emotion, any conflict. The word loser echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of my mind, not Tom's, but hers. It was the absolute, unadulterated cruelty in her tone that shattered something fundamental within me. My hand, reaching for the garage door handle, stopped midair. The metal felt impossibly cold, a chill that mirrored the one that had just shot through my veins, leaving me numb, trembling. I leaned against the wall, fighting back a wave of nausea. My reflection in the dusty garage window showed a pale, stunned stranger. Was this the man who'd poured 7 years of his life, his heart, his earnings, into a lie? The architect in me, the part that was all logic and structure, surfaced through the wreckage of my emotions. Analyze, plan, execute. The loving husband, the trusting fool, had just died there in the cold shadows of the garage. I took 3 deep, deliberate breaths, schooling my features into a mask of bland neutrality. I pulled open the garage door, grabbed 2 folding chairs, and walked back toward the patio, each step an act of supreme self-control. The walk felt like miles, the weight of the chairs insignificant compared to the crushing weight of their betrayal. I re-entered the warm glow of the patio, forcing a smile that felt like it was carved from ice. "Got them," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The rest of the dinner was a surreal performance. I was the perfect host, pouring wine, carving the lamb, laughing at Richard's predictable jokes about the stock market. My smile, I knew, was a masterpiece of deception, one Sarah herself would have admired had she known. I studied her across the table, this stranger wearing my wife's face. Had she always looked at me with that thinly veiled contempt, or was I just seeing it now, stripped bare by the horrifying clarity of her words? When Eleanor complimented the lamb, asking for my secret recipe, I nearly choked. "James, dear, this is divine. You truly have a knack. A knack for being useful, you mean?" I thought, like a well-trained dog. Outwardly, I just smiled and said, "Thank you, Eleanor. Glad you enjoy it." Sarah would occasionally touch my arm, a gesture of feigned affection that now felt like a spider's caress. "Don't let them get to you, honey," she murmured once, after a particularly pointed remark from Richard. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just nodded. The only anomaly in the tableau of familial deceit was Chloe, Sarah's younger cousin. She was an art student, the family's quiet eccentric, always kind, always a little out of step with their materialistic worldview. A few times during the dinner, I caught her looking at me, a strange, concerned expression in her usually bright, curious eyes. Did she know something? Or was she simply perceptive enough to sense the new, glacial tension I was radiating beneath my host's veneer? I filed away that look, that flicker of concern. It was the only thing that felt real in a room thick with lies. When they finally left, after hours that stretched into an eternity, Sarah turned to me, a bright, false smile plastered on her face. "That went well, don't you think? Dad seemed almost impressed with your lamb." She kissed my cheek. Her touch, once a comfort, now felt like a brand of betrayal. "You're such a good husband, James." The audacity of it nearly made me vomit. "Just tired," I managed, moving away from her touch. "Long day. Think I'll turn in early." Sarah nodded, already scrolling through her phone. "Okay, honey, I've got a few emails to catch up on for work anyway." I went upstairs, but sleep was an impossibility. The bedroom, our bedroom, suddenly felt alien, contaminated. I lay in the dark, her words from the garage replaying in an endless, agonizing loop. The initial shock wave of pain and betrayal had subsided, leaving behind a desolate landscape of devastation. And in that devastation, a single, hard point of clarity began to emerge. They thought I was a loser, a guy with a hammer. They had drawn the battle lines, confident in their underestimation of me. They just didn't know I was already planning the campaign. The love I'd felt for Sarah, the trust I'd placed in her, had been systematically dismantled in a matter of hours. What remained was a cold, sharp anger, and beneath that, a steely resolve I hadn't known I possessed. Dawn was a pale smear in the eastern sky when I finally rose. Sarah was still asleep, a faint, untroubled smile on her lips. The sight of it, once endearing, now filled me with a quiet rage. I went to my study, knowing her usual password patterns, a byproduct of years of helping her with various tech issues, a small detail I'd once considered part of our shared intimacy. I accessed our shared cloud drive and then her email on the desktop computer. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with fear, but with a grim sense of purpose. It didn't take long. A folder, innocuously labeled S, Personal Legal, Confidential. Inside, a meticulously organized collection of files. Emails to a high-powered divorce attorney, Arthur Vance, a name I vaguely recognized as one of the city's most aggressive litigators. The correspondence dated back 3 months. Spreadsheets detailed my business assets, valuations provided by some unknown appraiser, discussions of marital property and spousal contribution claims. Notes in Sarah's cool, precise handwriting outline strategies for maximizing her share, leveraging her support of my career. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Her support had consisted mainly of enjoying the fruits of my labor. Then I found the document that truly twisted the knife. A subfolder contained Sarah's notes to Vance. One line, in particular, seared itself into my brain. He's fundamentally a good man, likely to avoid conflict. We can leverage his desire for an amicable split to our advantage. Focus on emotional appeals if he resists financial terms. She wasn't just attacking my business, my finances. She was weaponizing my character, my decency, the very qualities I thought formed the bedrock of our marriage. This was a betrayal so profound it left me breathless. The next morning, I called in sick to my own firm for the first time in years. My mind was a whirlwind, but one name kept surfacing: Evelyn Reed. A business associate, Michael, whom I'd helped out of a tight spot a few years back, had once mentioned her. If you ever need a lawyer who's as sharp as a razor and fights like a wolverine, call Evelyn, he'd said. She specializes in complex divorces, especially for entrepreneurs whose soon-to-be exes suddenly remember all the sacrifices they made. At the time, I'd laughed. Now, it wasn't funny. Evelyn Reed's office was in a sleek downtown tower, a world away from the sawdust and blueprints of my daily life. She was in her late 40s, I guessed, impeccably dressed, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. I laid out the facts, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that was churning inside me. I told her about the garage conversation, the emails, Sarah's notes. I expected judgment, perhaps even pity. Instead, Evelyn listened with a focused intensity, occasionally making a brief note on a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice calm and direct. "This is a classic, albeit deplorable, case of predatory dissolution. Your wife and her family have made a common mistake. They've mistaken your hard work and lack of an inherited fortune for weakness. They've underestimated you." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Their arrogance, Mr. Hayes, will be their undoing. Your lack of a silver spoon background, which they so clearly disdain, is actually your strength. You know how to build from nothing, and that means you know how to fight for what's yours." She then walked me through the grim realities of divorce in our state, the concept of equitable distribution, how business assets acquired or significantly grown during a marriage are typically viewed. She emphasized the critical importance of a clear paper trail, documenting my premarital assets and the business's origins solely through my own efforts and funds. For a terrifying moment, the sheer scale of the fight ahead, the potential costs, The emotional drain threatened to overwhelm me. I saw my business, my life's work, being carved up, handed over to a woman who had plotted its demise while smiling in my face. This was my rock bottom, the crushing realization of what I stood to lose. For a moment, I confessed to Evelyn, my voice hoarse. I wanted to burn it all down, everything. Evelyn nodded slowly. A perfectly understandable reaction, Mr. Hayes. Or, she continued, her voice cutting through the haze of my despair, we can strategically dismantle their claims, brick by painstaking brick. We will show them what this guy with a hammer is truly capable of. Her confidence was a lifeline. The next 2 days were a blur of activity, conducted with a stealth and precision that would have made a covert operative proud. At home, I maintained the facade of the loving, slightly under-the-weather husband. Sarah, cocooned in her oblivious arrogance, was increasingly cheerful, even humming as she made plans for a surprise spa weekend she was booking for herself. "You deserve a treat, honey," she'd said, kissing my forehead. "You've been working so hard." The irony was a constant, bitter companion. My office became a war room. I unearthed every financial record imaginable, premarital bank statements, initial investment proofs for the firm, all unequivocally my own, scraped together from savings and a small loan from my own father, long since repaid, tax returns meticulously documenting the business's growth year by year. I gathered receipts for Sarah's law school tuition, copies of the checks I'd written to pay off her substantial student loans, records of her minimal financial input into our household versus my consistent, substantial reinvestment of profits back into the firm. Every document was a weapon, every spreadsheet a battle plan. I changed all my personal and business passwords, locked down access to sensitive financial information, and had a discreet conversation with my firm's longtime accountant, instructing him to prepare a detailed analysis of the company's valuation, pre- and post-marriage, and to flag any unusual inquiries. It was during this frantic excavation of our shared past that I found it, tucked away in an old box of documents labeled Miscellaneous, Keep. A faded manila envelope. Inside, a thick sheaf of papers. My blood ran cold as I recognized the letterhead. Arthur Vance, LLC. It was a prenuptial agreement, drafted 6 years prior, around the time my business had landed its first major, city-recognized project and started to show serious promise. It was incredibly, aggressively one-sided, outlining Sarah's claim to a significant portion of my business assets even then, should the marriage dissolve. She had never mentioned it, never asked me to sign it, never even hinted at its existence. This wasn't a recent, impulsive act of greed. This was a long game, a calculated strategy years in the making. I hadn't married a partner. I'd married a predator in waiting, one who had patiently bided her time until her investment, me, reached a maturity she deemed profitable enough to cash out. The cold fury that discovery ignited burned away any lingering vestiges of doubt or misplaced sentimentality. This was war, and I was going to win. The evening of the second day after that fateful dinner, as I was meticulously cross-referencing financial statements with the timeline of Sarah's secret legal consultations, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from Chloe, Sarah's art student cousin. "James, I need to talk to you. It's about Sarah, and it's not good. Please, can we meet? Somewhere private." A sliver of apprehension, mixed with a strange kind of hope, went through me. Chloe had always been the outlier in that family, the one with a genuine heart. We arranged to meet the next morning at a small, independent coffee shop in a neighborhood neither of us frequented. Chloe arrived looking pale and distressed, her usual artistic vibrancy dimmed by an obvious inner turmoil. She picked at a muffin, her gaze darting around nervously before finally settling on me. "James," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to say this. My family, I know how they can be, Chloe," I said gently. Tears welled in her eyes. "A few weeks ago," she continued, taking a shaky breath, "I was at my aunt and uncle's house. Sarah was on a video call with Tom and Uncle Richard. I wasn't eavesdropping exactly, but the den door was open, they were loud. She recounted how she'd overheard them strategizing, Richard advising Sarah on how to play the victim card if I resisted her demands, Tom joking about how I'd soon be funding Sarah's much-needed lifestyle upgrade. My jaw tightened, but I let her continue. The most damning revelation was yet to come. And then Chloe said, her voice dropping even lower, about a month or so before that, after one of those awful family dinners you thankfully missed, Sarah, she'd had a bit too much wine. She was bragging to me, actually bragging, about her exit strategy, about Arthur Vance, about how she was going to secure her rightful share of your success because she'd invested her youth in me. Chloe winced at the memory. She even said something about Tom knowing a guy who was more her speed, someone she could finally be with once she was financially independent. It was disgusting. Then Chloe pulled out her phone, her hand trembling. I'm an aspiring documentarian, James. I record things, sometimes sounds, conversations for atmosphere. I don't know why, but I had my phone recording ambient sound that night, just for a project. And I caught a snippet of it. Her talking about the lawyer, the money. It's short, maybe 30 seconds, but it's her voice. It's undeniable. She looked at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. I can't be part of this, James. They're acting like vultures. You've always been kind to me, treated my art seriously when everyone else dismissed it. This might mean I lose their financial support for my studies. They might even disown me, but I can't live with myself if I don't do what's right. I was speechless, not just at the content of the recording, but at Chloe's courage, the immense personal risk she was taking. This quiet, artistic young woman possessed more integrity in her little finger than her entire family combined. The audio recording, however short, was a bombshell. It was irrefutable proof of Sarah's premeditated intent, delivered in her own voice. I returned to Evelyn Reed's office later that morning, armed with the unpresented prenup and, with Chloe's reluctant permission, a copy of the audio file. Evelyn listened to the recording, her expression grimly impressed. "This isn't just a divorce, Mr. Hayes," she stated, her voice devoid of any softness. "This is attempted financial assassination with a documented history of premeditation." Miss Chloe's testimony and this recording, coupled with that 6-year-old prenup drafted by your wife's current counsel, it paints a very clear, very ugly picture of bad faith. Mr. Vance is going to have an interesting day. Evelyn outlined her strategy, and it was bold. They expect you to be served, to react defensively, to negotiate from a position of weakness. We're going to flip the script so hard it will give them whiplash. And so, on the morning of the third day after the anniversary dinner, the counteroffensive was launched. Evelyn, on my behalf, filed for divorce first. The petition was concise, professional, citing irreconcilable differences, but it was the accompanying motions that carried the real firepower. Evelyn filed a motion for an emergency ex parte order, meaning Sarah wouldn't be notified beforehand, to temporarily freeze any unusual transfers from significant marital accounts and to demand immediate, full financial disclosure from Sarah. The motion cited evidence, including sworn affidavits referencing the unpresented prenup and witness testimony to admissions of bad faith that suggest a clear and present danger of dissipation of marital assets. Simultaneously, Evelyn dispatched a courier to Arthur Vance's office. The letter was a masterpiece of legal froideur. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that our client, James Hayes, was fully aware of Mr. Vance's client, Sarah Hayes, and her long-standing, premeditated intent to defraud him of his premarital and separately created business assets. It referenced, inter alia, an unpresented antenuptial agreement drafted by Mr. Vance's own firm some 6 years prior, and further corroborated by independent witness testimony and audio recordings. The letter concluded by stating we were prepared to litigate the matter to the fullest extent of the law, including exploring actions for civil conspiracy and reporting certain ethical irregularities should it become necessary. It trusted, however, that Mr. Vance's client would see the profound wisdom in a swift and equitable resolution based on actual marital property, not on a foundation of deceit and avarice. There was no direct contact from me to Sarah. Complete professional silence. I felt a grim sense of purpose, the calm that descends before a meticulously planned demolition. The explosion came late that afternoon. Sarah was served with the divorce papers and the emergency motion at her prestigious law firm, reportedly in the middle of a departmental meeting. The public nature of the service, the aggressive legal stance, and the stunning realization that I had struck first with such devastating precision shattered her carefully constructed composure. Her lawyer, Arthur Vance, upon receiving Evelyn's blistering letter and undoubtedly recognizing the catastrophic implications of the evidence we held, especially the damning detail about the old prenup originating from his own firm, would have given Sarah a very blunt, very unpleasant assessment of her drastically weakened position and her potential professional and personal exposure. My phone, which I'd left on silent on my desk, began to vibrate and vibrate and vibrate. It was like a trapped, furious insect. When I finally looked at it an hour later, the screen was a cascade of notifications. 47 missed calls, voicemails, and a torrent of text messages from Sarah. The first wave was pure, unadulterated rage. "James, what is this? You can't be serious. There has to be a mistake." Followed by threats. "My father will ruin you. You have no idea who you're dealing with. How dare you serve me at my work? You're trying to destroy my career." Then, confusion and attempted gaslighting. "This isn't you, James. Someone is poisoning your mind. We can fix this, baby. That dinner was wonderful, remember? We were happy." As the reality of her situation clearly began to sink in, the tone shifted to pleading and bargaining. "Okay, I admit I was upset when I talked to Tom. I said things I didn't mean. Tom and Dad, they pressure me sometimes. Please, let's just talk. Don't throw away 7 years. I'll do anything. We can go to counseling." And then the raw panic. "My partnership, if this gets public." "James, please." "The audio?" "What audio?" "Chloe wouldn't. She couldn't. I'll give you money, whatever you want. Just make this stop. Call off your lawyer. Tell me what you want." I read through them, each message a fresh crack appearing in her flawless facade, revealing the desperate, grasping person beneath. The power had irrevocably shifted, not with an angry shout or a dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet, calculated click of the send button from my lawyer's office. The architect of her own downfall was now buried in the rubble of her ambition. I felt a cold, weary sense of vindication, but no triumph. Just the grim satisfaction of a necessary, painful job well done. I did not reply to a single message. My silence was my answer. The weeks that followed were a maelstrom of legal maneuvering, but it was a storm largely of Sarah's making as she and her family thrashed against the irrefutable facts Evelyn Reed had so skillfully deployed. Richard and Tom, true to form, attempted to bluster and intimidate. Richard apparently made several irate calls directly to Evelyn, full of vague threats about his influence and resources. Evelyn, as she later recounted to me with a hint of dry amusement, coolly informed him that her professional ethics precluded her from discussing her client's case with opposing, unrepresented parties and that any further communication should be directed through Mr. Vance. Tom, I heard through the grapevine, tried to spread rumors about my business practices, a desperate, clumsy attempt to discredit me that fizzled out when no one of any consequence paid him any attention. The real battle, however, was happening between Sarah and her own counsel. Arthur Vance, facing the deeply uncomfortable reality of the unpresented prenup that had originated from his firm years ago and the undeniable evidence of Sarah's bad faith, clearly had no appetite for a protracted, public fight he was almost certain to lose, one that could also raise awkward ethical questions for him. He pushed Sarah hard to settle. The audio recording from Chloe, though Sarah initially tried to deny its authenticity, was a significant blow. Chloe, to her immense credit, stood firm, providing a sworn affidavit confirming its origin and context. Sarah's law firm, a place where reputation was paramount, also began to subtly pressure her to resolve the unfortunate personal matter quietly and swiftly, lest it reflect poorly on them. The settlement, when it finally came, was a world away from Sarah's initial greedy ambitions. She received a fair and legally mandated portion of the actual joint marital assets, primarily some equity in the house, which we agreed to sell, and a share of our joint savings. But her audacious claim on my business, the one she and Tom had so confidently discussed in the garage, was entirely dismissed. The evidence of its premarital origins and my sole, continuous contribution to its growth was overwhelming. The substantial funds I had poured into her law degree and the repayment of her student loans were also clearly demarcated, and while not fully recouped as a direct offset, they significantly impacted the final division of smaller assets in my favor. It was, as Evelyn put it, a clean, surgical extraction from a parasitic entanglement. The fallout within Sarah's family was, from what Chloe cautiously relayed, spectacular in its dysfunction. Richard and Tom didn't rally around Sarah with support. They turned on her, furious not at her deceit, but at her incompetence, her failure to successfully execute their shared vision of plunder. The wolves, Chloe said quietly one day over coffee, have turned on one of their own. Their house is a viper pit of accusations and recriminations. It was a bitter harvest of their own sowing. The divorce was finalized with a quiet stroke of a judge's pen. The house, our former home, sold quickly. Standing in its empty rooms for the last time, rooms I had once filled with so much hope and effort, I felt a pang of sadness, not for the marriage that was, but for the marriage I had believed it to be. Then, I closed the door and walked away, leaving the ghosts of that life behind. I found a modern loft apartment downtown, closer to my firm, a blank canvas with high ceilings and vast windows, a space that was entirely, unequivocally mine. The silence in it wasn't loneliness, it was sovereignty. I had a quiet dinner with Chloe before she left for an art school in another state, a scholarship she'd won partly on the strength of a portfolio I'd encouraged her to develop. "You showed me what true loyalty looks like, Chloe," I told her, raising my glass. "In a strange way, you've become more family to me than my actual family by marriage ever was." We promised to stay in touch. She was, after all, a testament to the fact that integrity could blossom even in the most toxic of soils. I offered to help with a recommendation for a prestigious grant she was considering, a genuine act of friendship, no strings attached. In the months that followed, I did a lot of thinking. I replayed scenes from my marriage, looking for the red flags I'd so willingly ignored, blinded by love, by hope, by perhaps a subconscious desire for the approval of Sarah's formidable family. I had wanted their acceptance so badly, I realized that I'd willingly worn the chains of their expectations. The price of that acceptance had been my own self-worth. Never again. My business, freed from the shadow of impending legal battles and the silent drain of a toxic partnership, thrived. I landed a major commission to design a new public library, a project that resonated deeply with my belief in community and accessible knowledge. I reconnected with old friends I drifted from during the all-consuming years of my marriage and building my firm. I even started dating again, cautiously at first, my antennae now finely tuned to authenticity and emotional honesty. My boundaries, once porous, were now clearly defined, respectfully asserted. I wasn't bitter. The experience had left scars, yes, but they were scars of survival, of lessons learned, not of defeat. I understood now that true strength wasn't about never falling or never being betrayed. It was about how you rose, how you rebuilt, not just your life, but your trust in your own judgment. Some relationships, I realized, like poorly constructed buildings, are designed to fail from the outset, built on faulty foundations of mismatched values and hidden agendas. Escaping them, however painful the demolition, is a profound form of liberation. They call me a loser because I built with my hands, with my mind, not according to their narrow rules of inherited status and cynical entitlement. But standing here now in my own space, looking out over the city skyline that I helped to shape, I knew the truth. What I was building now was a life of integrity, a future founded on self-respect, a foundation no betrayal, however calculated, could ever shake. It took losing what I thought I wanted to finally find what I truly needed, myself, whole and uncompromised. And in that discovery, I found a peace more valuable than any fortune. What's one boundary you've set that changed your life for the better? Share your stories. Sometimes the quietest acts of self-preservation are the most powerful, the truest architecture of a well-lived life.